And he was, he's been a Republican all his life, even before he could vote. And he was the youngest mayor elected in Tishomingo. In fact, the youngest one elected probably in the whole United States, I believe. Is that right? Okay. And so, and he's a private attorney, has his practice there in Tishomingo. And I'll just turn everything over to Dustin.
Thank you, Lonnie. I'm going to stand back here and come on in. You got my seat right here. Don't let me bother you. You just come and go. I'm going to stand back here, and if you just turn your seats, if you will, so you can see. I want to thank Lonnie Lou. We've become phone pals over the last few weeks. And I called her twice yesterday. I thought I was calling two different people, and I was calling Lonnie Lou twice. So Lonnie Lou, thank you for putting this meeting together. What a wonderful crowd of people. I want to introduce my wife, Nicole, who's already been introduced. I want to thank her and Matt. We've been all over most of the southern part of this district, and we live in Tishomingo. How many have ever been to Tishomingo? You know where that is? Tishomingo is an hour and a half south of McAlester. And so it was always a trip to come to McAlester. That was a trip in and of itself. But I'll tell you, now that Nicole and I are going to Salisaw and Poto, when we get to McAlester about midnight, we feel like we're home, even though we have an hour and a half to go. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the congressional race. You've all heard that Dan Boren is going to retire at the right young age of 37. That's what he's calling it, retire. What we know is the polling looks like he probably would not be able to hold the seat. So I think that it looks almost probably the best that it's ever looked for us to elect a Republican next November to this congressional seat. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing, what I believe, and get your thoughts and feedback. And I do want to take some questions from all of you tonight as we look at this race. First thing is, I am 35 years old, and I'm from Tishomingo. When I was 17 years old, I began looking at registering to vote, and everyone I knew was a Democrat. My mom and dad are here, and I won't beat up on them too much, but I came from a family of Democrats, conservative Democrats. But I thought, when I go into that election office, I want to know what I am when I go to register. And it's kind of an unusual question for a young person to ask. Most people go in, and election secretary back in 1993 said you have to register Democrat or you can't vote. How many of you heard that before? How many know that's not true? But that's what we're going to do. So I went to the local Democratic Party boss, and I asked for the platform of the Democratic Party. And he ordered it. He didn't have one, but he ordered it. And that was a mistake because I read it. And before I even read the Republican platform, I knew, Russ, I was not a Democrat. I knew at the age of 17 I didn't believe in the liberal policies of the National Democratic Party. Even at that time, had already adopted it in their platform. Well, there were no Republicans in Johnson County, so I had to call over to Marshall County to Lynn Wendell. How many of you know Lynn Wendell? 16 years was our Republican National Committee man for the state. Lynn came over and took me to lunch and brought me the Republican platform, and I read that. And I knew right away that I was Republican. So I marched into the courthouse on my 18th birthday, and I said, I'm here to register, and I want to register as a Republican. Well, they gave me the same argument that you all have heard, but I registered as a Republican. As I've been looking at this race, I was digging through my file cabinet, and I actually found this card, and this is September 23rd, 1993. That's my birthday. And you'll see it says Republican, and I'm proud to tell you, I've been a Republican from day one. I've been a Republican for half my life, and I believe in the conservative values that you all believe in. I would never have thought back then that today we would live in the most Democratic party in the state of Oklahoma, where we were poised to elect a Republican congressman. In 17 short years, we've gone from Little Dixie being the stronghold of the Democratic Party to now we're poised to elect a Republican. So 11 days after my 18th birthday, I found myself on the Tishomingo City Council, and as Lonnie Lou mentioned, in April of the year I graduated high school, a month before high school graduation, I was elected mayor of Tishomingo. And I served 2 terms as the youngest mayor in the state of Oklahoma and the youngest mayor in the United States. And I did that, I'm proud to tell you, as a Republican, 17 years ago in Tishomingo, when there were virtually no Republicans. So after I served my terms as mayor and began to work at the town, I became very fascinated by local government. Did you know that local government is really the government that's closest to the people? The closer we can get government to the people, Wayne, I think the better government that we're going to have. The problem we're seeing now is the government is so far from the people. It's so big in Washington, it's becoming nothing but a burden. And I want to talk a little bit about the burden that government is being placed upon the people. But I began to work with our city attorney there and developed a relationship with him, worked 2 years, and thought, you know, I want to come back to Tishomingo. I want to be involved in my local community. And didn't really want to go to law school. I wanted to be a doctor until I went to college, Lonnie Lou, to chemistry. And I knew I better jump off and not be a doctor.
Yeah, that happened to my daughter.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And, you know, to be honest with you, I just didn't like lawyers. The city clerk came to me, she said, Dustin, you need to go to law school. You need to come back and be our city attorney. I said, no, Geneva, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't like lawyers. But I liked the city attorney at the time. I saw that he did a lot of good in our town. I saw that he worked hard. I saw that he helped people on Main Street. So after I finished my term as mayor, I went off to Washington. I worked the summer for Senator Nichols in Washington, D.C. I came back and I worked for Wes Watkins. I was his district director here in what was the old 3rd District of Oklahoma. How many of you worked in Wes's campaign? Any of you worked in Wes Watkins' congressional campaign back in the 1996 race? So see, a lot of new people involved in the Republican Party. But we won this race in the 3rd District, and then I went off to law school. And but in law school, I began to learn more about the government. I began to learn more about what our founding fathers laid out and what their intentions were for our government. How many of you know that it was never intended that we have the massive federal government that we're saddled with today? Does anyone believe that? Yeah. I became president at the OU Law School of the Federalist Society, which espouses the teachings of James Madison. And in the law school environment, that's not a very popular club to belong to, but I was proud to be the president of the Federalist Society, which teaches that the federal government should put judges on the bench that are not creating law, that are interpreting the law, and that the federal government's main purpose is to protect the people and to protect the freedoms of the people and not to be involved in every aspect of our day-to-day lives. Are you out here, amen? That's what I'm doing. Another thing that I didn't know was that in downtown Oklahoma City, all those big buildings are filled with lawyers. How many of you know those big, tall skyscrapers?
We know it.
Well, I thought, I'll go try that, and I lasted 2 weeks. I quit, and I said, if this is what this is about, I don't want to do it. This is not what I like. I'm going home to Tishomingo. So immediately, when I graduated, I went down to Tishomingo, and I'll tell you that in 2 weeks, and I've got Laura here who works with me, in 2 weeks I celebrate my 10th anniversary. I've been there 1 decade at 225 West Main on Main Street in rural America. And I'll tell you, how many of you go down Main Street to McAlester? You work there, you drive there. There's no closer way to be involved, to know what's going on in America, than to go to rural America and work on Main Street. So for the last 10